Wolong Fallen Dynasty is uh, a third-person action RPG, which is definitely a video game in the style and spirit of the Nioh franchise, which Team Ninja, it's sort of been the only good thing Team Ninja has come up with in the last several years, as they have fully milked and overdone the Dead or Alive series alongside the Ninja Gaiden series. Their reinvigoration of it in 3D. So in many ways, what this Chinese period piece does is reskin Neo 2 and provide about one third of the gameplay experience in terms of playable hours. Now, Neo 2 was an enormous game. I kind of hated it and kind of loved it because between its three DLCs, its uh, endless stream of loot, and base 140-hour base game play experience, I probably spent 300 hours with that game before I fully beat it. And that was including uh, enjoying some of the PvP experience, enjoying a lot of the co-op experience, grinding for things, and even venturing into the New Game Plus, which there are, I think, 3 or 4 New Game Pluses in each of those games. So while I did hate it, I did love it in terms of getting so much value out of a game that was neon colored, faceless, and a bit annoying in its general loop. Uh, I could say the same about any Diablo game, so it's really not a complaint. Now, when we get to talking about Wolong, the problem is that this is less of a game. It is, and it's kind of a faceless Romance of the Three Kingdoms sort of Dynasty Warriors looking game too. So what we get is a lesser game with less things to do that plays a lot better. Now, I loved all the combat options in Neo. In those games, I spent so much time customizing my movesets, trying out different weapons, specializing my gear to those weapons, to those uh, magic affinities, using all the tools available, specializing in ninja skills. Like, I got into those systems so deep that I would sometimes sit there for an hour, play with the menus for that long, and not play the game. I would literally just catch up with all the homework that I needed to do to get through all my gear, uh, build, upgrade all my gear, farm new pieces, craft things. It was such an involved game that I'd forget that playing it, I forget to play it sometimes. With Wolong, they've gotten rid of that sort of fixation on the systemic depth of things and worked in a simpler mechanic for combat, for movement, and for upgrading all of your various systems. Now, it's still a very deep game. There is a lot there, but the big thing is that they have completely aped the general sense of combat that you get from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. It's blatant. It's just right there that if it isn't being Neo, it is being Sekiro. And the problem with that is that it's not as good as Sekiro. It's not as specialized. There's many different weapon types, and different weapon types have different parry or deflect rates. So your success will really hinge on what amount of how well your timing will match up with the margin of error on each type of weapon. Now, that's forgivable. Maybe the unoriginal, faceless nature of the game is soulless and kind of shit, and I'm probably not going to buy the DLC because the story was so fucking boring. But playing the game was a lot of fun, and I really got into the flow of combat. I think that it moves very naturally. It gives you a ton of options to work with. It gives you an entertaining enough magic system that it does seem tailored to promote co-op. Now, multiplayer co-op is the most fun you're going to have with Wolong, because playing this game by yourself is kind of stupid. Not only is it hard enough to where you're not really impressing anyone with hitting your dodge button at the right time, while it's what you're supposed to do. That's how the game is played. And playing with other players gives a sense of accomplishing something with other people. It's sort of how the game is built, because it rewards you in every way for both bringing in reinforcements, which are not NPCs who go along with you, but it also brings along folks. You can have people come into your game the same way Nioh did, where you use two of an item to bring in two people, and you gain those items when you play multiplayer. So it kind of encourages you to keep going back, helping people beat bosses, and you can even invade in this one, which is new because I don't remember Nioh 1 or 2 having the choice to be invaded by other players. You could summon shadows of the players that you could fight for rewards, but in this one, people can invade, and you can select it on or off in the options, and that's a huge add to this type of game. And if they do make a Nioh 3, which there's nowhere to go with that story, but that within any sense. But if they do make a Nioh 3, or they elaborate on this game, uh, really there is a lot of uh, value in the way they've set up the multiplayer and cooperative elements. Now, also, there's a jump button. Another thing that worked for Sekiro and kind of works here. The jump is a little bit underwhelming until it becomes kind of a double jump, which involves automatic wall jumping, which means that the verticality of this game is kind of pointless. Uh, the level design is so basic and just so nothing that it won't really matter that you can jump outside of combat options and drop in attacks. So it feels good. It feels faster, but it all uses stamina. And stamina management is another thing they take from Sekiro in terms of pressing the attack, uh, exact deflects, parries, all that stuff. All of it costs or adds to your general stamina and your bar, which allows you to do more moves, special moves, and all that. So there, it's admirably depthy in terms of the combat options, and that's great. It feels better. There's less weapon options so that you can get around to trying all of them, and upgrading everything is a matter of just inevitably gaining enough loot to find what you want to use. Thankfully, the loot grind and the level grind have been uh, eased in this game. Now, and Nioh is sort of infamously like, they're always setting a goal where, like, if this area is difficult, go back and play the last area 3 times, and it might take you 2 hours to go through that huge level twice. But when you do, you'll get rewards each time, and you'll be able to upgrade your gear, and you'll level up a few times. And generally, there's always a positive to replaying areas in Nioh 2, and to some degree Nioh 1. They didn't encourage it as much in the first game. In this game, you don't have to replay these levels once you've gotten all of the flags and worked up your general level in each one. Uh, I'd rather not explain all of the systems in this game, but basically, the if you 100% each level once, that's good enough. But you should do all the side stuff. I did all the side stuff. I was at level like 120 something by the end, and it was so easy at a certain point once I had figured out exactly how the timing worked on my particular weapon for deflects. Deflects and parry counters, those sort of defenses are really the only way to beat this game. It's so much easier. You can't chip damage these bosses. It'll just take an hour with each one, and they do a lot of damage. It yeah. So there's no alternative to playing the way they tell you to play. That's kind of the big downside. But it's not as hard as it seems. You can always get help from other people, and you can always be as cheap as you want. It really doesn't matter. They give you the options that are there outside of the very difficult tutorial level, which was a problem for me. It took me about 3 hours to finally beat it. Now, I guess, yeah, so I made a lot of the main points here, but I don't feel like I'm either praising or shitting on the game, because it really is the perfect example of a mediocre game that is a lot of fun to play. those always seem to be the ones that stick with me most. Is where, yeah, this game is kind of meh. It's not that good, but I spent I think 51, yeah, about 50, almost 52 hours playing this game, and I eventually was having fun playing it. I can admit that it's mediocre. It's definitely a moderate recommendation on my part. And there's a lot of, I could go on certainly very heated rants on how shit and unfair and kind of nonsense a lot of this game was in terms of difficulty spikes. I could go on about how terrible the voice acting was in English. I could go on about how so much of the story beats were just basically that rote Nioh 2 thing where you go and fight a boss and then you get its divine spirit and you move on. So it was all just kind of blasé in that sense, but I still had fun with it. And I couldn't deny the fact that there's lasting value here. I would actually replay the game on the harder difficulty and continue my character. And I don't really care about the loot, and the challenge is fun, but it really is fun as a co-op experience. And I wish Nioh was uh, this seamless and this quick with its co-op experience, because a new one of those would be a lot better with the amount of options that are available in that game versus this one. So uh, maybe it's just a game for people who like Nioh, and that's just it. So take that as you will.